Valley to come to Boundary, not Boundary, but Rupert and Broadway. So he came to our BCTL conference, our professional conference this weekend. He's an incredible networker. So if you give him your email, expect to get something back. He's just really wonderful in connecting people and seeing connections that other people might not. And so welcome to Trevor. He's also the president of the Provincial Manitoba Professional Association. And I guess you can tell more about yourself.
Thanks. That's good. So we'll start, and we're going to do some introductions to begin. And then if this other person from Langley joins us during that time, that's great. If she joins, yeah, so if she joins us a bit late, then we'll put her on the spot when she arrives with that. So I'll just jump into, I get to the right screen. There we are. So we'll do some quick introductions with those of us, because Janice knows a lot of people. Some of you have connected and know each other, but then there's others that are new faces tonight. We'll talk a little bit, well, not a little bit. The whole focus is just on different aspects of workplace and getting jobs and employment. And I'll talk briefly on the funding cuts that has been affected within that whole realm. Some of you might be aware of it. Some of you may not realize the extent of what the government's done to gut that system. And then we'll just follow up with some next steps. So I'll chat really quickly who I am, and then we'll have you guys share. And on Thursday night, we realized we just kind of let people ramble for a few minutes at each. So that took a while, but we'll be a bit tighter tonight. There's 4 quick questions. We'll give you about 2 minutes just to answer those. And then we'll go into the main focus. Yeah, Janice said she'll take the ruler and crack you on the knuckles with that. So just a quick overview. I grew up in Alberta, 2 hours east of Calgary. I was with the Christian Missionary Alliance and Frontiers in 1990. So after Bible college, I was there from 98 till 2004. It was a joint focus on an unreached people group in East Java in Surabaya. So a lot of people know Jakarta or Bali. And Surabaya is the 2nd largest city, but many people have never heard of it with that. And then we moved to Winnipeg. So I met my wife there. We came back and moved to Winnipeg in 2004. And then I've been part of Evangelical Church there since then. So I've been a teacher for many years. I've been a teacher trainer for 8 years. So if some of you are familiar with Providence University College, so I got my master's from there when training teachers. And then since that time, I was training either with them or at the University of Winnipeg. And I'll talk briefly about that probably as well. So just as we had a conference here on Friday and Saturday for the professionals in Manitoba teaching adults and like either in universities, colleges, or in what's the LINC program, the adult EAL. I was the conference coordinator for a few years, and I'm the current president for the professional side. I'm also part of TESOL Canada. So there's recognized, you can get TESOL training or get a certificate on a weekend from Oxford or whatever. Those are not considered recognized programs. They're not, there's advantages to them because you can get it in a weekend and go overseas and teach. But TESOL Canada is the governing body for teacher training programs across Canada that's recognized. And I'm on 2 committees within that as well. So the advantages and the reason I highlight those is every few weeks to a quarter, I'm interacting with different groups, whether it's IRCC focused or with different, which is the federal government that provides money for all these programs, or different provinces and their coordinators and boards. So that's given me a good oversight of what's happening across Canada in addition to that. I'll have you guys guess. So my wife and I have been homestay parents for 15 years as our son was growing up. And I just want you to guess, how many students do you think that our family has hosted and lived with us over those 15 years? Just throw out some numbers. 60, a little bit under. How many? A little bit under 60, yeah.
Oh, under 60.
Yeah, not over. Oh, yeah. Any other guesses?
In 15 years?
In 15 years, yeah.
45?
45, yeah, just slightly over. So I think our current two students are like 46 and 47 or 47 and 48. But that means we've had students from all around the world with probably 12 different countries. Some have stayed for a semester, some have stayed for, well, one fellow from Vietnam, it's his third year living with us. So we're doing something. Well, my wife's Indonesian Chinese background, so she cooks Asian food several times a week, and I cook the, the roasts and the chicken and the potatoes and carrots, etc. So anyway, I'll just also highlight this very quickly, but the other side of me is I haven't always been in the classroom, or I've been in the classroom, but I've also done stuff on the side. So I used to import products from Indonesia to Canada for a number of years. I helped people get out of debt, both newcomers and Canadians, specifically for a few years, but I continue to give workshops on that. Content creator, so I have stuff on YouTube, and I'm moving because of government cuts. My wife and I were both let go at the end of March from where we were working. So I'm going to move more into helping small business with social media content and video and different things with that. But the last one I'll just highlight. So many people may or may not be aware of Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. So it's a nationwide, I describe it usually as like an umbrella. So there's 20 or 25 different denominations underneath it. Their main push when there's government legislation coming through and different bills, that they kind of represent the Christian voice, the Christian Protestant voice across Canada, and help influence change, or at least petitioning for things. They have a project called Welcome Church, and there may be, how many of you here are members of Welcome Church? Because I know there's a few. A project. So they have various projects and focuses underneath their umbrella. So Welcome Church is a project that they started about 3 years ago, but their goal is to help churches across Canada network with each other that are helping newcomers. So we've partnered with International Student Ministries of Canada, International Association of Refugees of Canada, and other organizations. So we go to different cities, we gather either the pastors or the volunteers working with newcomers, not just ESL ministry, but any form of work. And then we just host or facilitate so that they can know and meet each other. Because sometimes they're like, oh, you're a kilometer away and you also have refugees from, that have come in from Eritrea. Well, we never heard of you. So we try to facilitate networking within the city or the area that we're at. Right now, there's 140 churches that are kind of loosely associated. They've signed up under that. There's training, etc. But I'm their community liaison. So I was in Thunder Bay, Toronto, Winnipeg, now Vancouver. I'll also be in Alberta and in Halifax, etc. over the next 6 months. And then, for example, if there's a church that says, well, we have a lot of refugees, what are the resources? Well, we can connect you with either national or local resources. And then because of my work in the government and settlement, then a lot of times we can also say, oh, well, in your area, here's the immigration services. In BC, there's like ISS or other government funded programs that you can help direct students or learners to. So a little bit of a broad overview. So here's the questions that, and this is more curiosity, like Janice knows quite a bit about you. I'm just now getting introduced to most of you. So just share your name. Are you working or volunteering with newcomers? Because I recognize in every group I speak with, there's some that might be employed with governments or nonprofits or churches that are, but there's many that are volunteering. How long have you helped newcomers? That can be a loaded question. So if you want to just say a long time, I'm okay with that rather than 51 years and 24. Yeah. Anyway. And then how do you find resources? If you're helping or creating or looking at online for things, are there specific resources you're using? Like some churches are using specific books, either from Janice or from other, English materials that have been created, or some people say I make them, but I'm just curious with those questions. Okay. So I'm just going through the list of names, and I remember there was several. I'm just thinking alphabetically, which I used to hate when I was in school, because I was a P and my last name starts with P, so I was usually further down. But with, is Alicia here tonight? Okay, well, we'll start with you and then Carolyn, you'll go next, and then we'll just do you can choose who will go after you. How's that? So that way so yeah, just tell us your name, organization, and how you usually find resources.
I'm Alicia Corright, and I am a volunteer out in Newcomers, doing conversational ESL. I have helped newcomers for a number of years. We were in Alberta before this, doing similar things, so probably about 18 years now altogether. And then for resources, often searching online, or our church used to have a few staff people who had developed the curriculum or resources, and sometimes I'll go back and kind of
Yes.
modify and adapt.
Right, yeah, yeah, okay. Nice. Good. Carolyn, okay, so you can just choose. You can say just, yeah. Yeah.
My name is Susan Robertson. I am currently I'm on staff here at Bramble Chapel, with a bunch of different, things, children's ministry, ESL and women's ministry. So, ESL is one of the hats I wear, and then have some lovely folks who volunteer as well. And, I've been helping newcomers. My husband and I lived in Mongolia in 1992. So that's when we first started teaching English. And then sort of since then, I've been involved in ESL here on and off through the years. Yeah, but currently this program is 10 years old, the one we're running right now, which is called English Plus, and where I usually find resources.
As we look at it, it's not so much how many years, but just the experience, and then, students or learners are always grateful, and I think you've seen that in all the classes, that the time you spend with them and you get to know them a bit and just help them in their settlement and being part of community, or feeling cared for, I guess, as they're here in Canada. So let's just give me a couple of things with people that you've worked with. What would you say are some of the areas that work-related problems our EAL learners have?
Finding a job.
Right. So finding the job's almost always the first and sometimes an ongoing issue, especially if they're underemployed within that. Okay, what else?
That they misunderstood some instructions.
Right. So, yeah, so in the workplace, maybe receiving instructions from a coworker, from their manager, making mistakes within that. Yeah. Listening. Exactly. So listening to because often the complaint I hear is, I don't understand my coworkers, or they were speaking too fast, or I need to use the phone and I'm not sure, did I get the message right, or within that. So those are all parts within that. This kind of shapes how I've guided tonight, because what I'll do is talk a little bit about, actually, I'll go up, sorry, a bit before this, just to the very start. But so I've divided into 3 broad sections. Whoops. Yeah. And I think, based on what I knew from last Thursday, but also I know how I teach, some of you will feel like this is a fire hose of just a whole bunch of information. So, but I'll try to keep it in these 3 areas, and there is a section where we'll have for a bit of discussion and working with a partner. But we'll talk about resources and what's available and how can we help with job preparation, so finding the jobs. We'll talk about on the job, so the workplace English environments and areas that they may need help with. And then also something that's not often or talked about as much is, if they're underemployed and they need a different job to go in their career, or if they're in a position and they're not being chosen as manager, even though that could be, what could be supports that we could provide to help them understand? Because maybe it's cultural issues, maybe it's the English, like sometimes they're just, oh, my English isn't good enough, so I'm not being hired as a manager. But there may be other issues that are affecting the management from taking that. So those will be the 3 kind of sections that I'll look at. So now I'll flip that. Yes, yeah, sorry. So
with all the live links. So
yeah.
I'll share them.
So there's going to be some links to websites, and I'll share the PowerPoint, and this is being recorded. You're not being recorded. but I have this recorded and I'm sharing the screen. So my face and, well, I think my face is being shown, but this part, so that will also be a reference that you can look back at different pieces. It'll take about a week for me to, get that up and a link sent out to you. And then one last thing, I guess it'll kind of go in with the last part of upskilling or job advancement, but I will touch briefly because many learners are not the accountants or lawyers or doctors or nurses that they were in their home country, their country of origin. So that can also be an area of just what's the process depending on their profession. So with job preparation, I looked at 3 sections. So doing a resume, job search, and job interviews, which are very, common categories. But if you had a group of students that came to you, how would you help them, or what advice would you give them to help them with their Canadian resume?
Suggest that they get volunteer work so that they have a Canadian reference.
Okay, so that they have references that are in it. Good. What else? And I'll maybe take a note of some of these suggestions as okay, what else or how else would you help them with their resume and kind of getting pieces of their resume together?
Trying to remember anything they've done, even remotely relevant, right? Like,
Okay.
never, okay, but you did something that has skills, you can highlight the skills you use in whatever that position was.
Good. And there's a couple of things that you mentioned there. So anything that's relevant and the skills, and then explained in a way for Canadian managers to understand. That's one of the biggest challenges because I've looked at many resumes and like I had one person, he was managing 200 people. It wasn't even mentioned on his resume it just said I was a manager. I shouldn't say it wasn't mentioned, but he didn't tell the depth of what company and the experience and exposure that he had of dealing with a wide range of things. And then, like you said, relevant skills. So some people have this long 3-page resume, but I actually did this a few times. I'm looking at some of my old resumes from 10 years ago. I'm like, why was I talking about this? It wasn't even relevant for that job that they were applying for. Okay, anything else? Yeah.
So then that's, I would have been.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
do you know anything about now with like AI and all that? Like, is it more those template ones that look colorful and have a photo? I don't know if we're teaching them to include a photo, or are we not doing the photo because then there's profiling, or like, are there any kind of updated things that are coming now with the AI? I had a template, like, title.
Right. Yeah, within
that.
that.
There, the bullet points underneath, like, a very black and white kind of
Yeah.
one, but is there any update or just?
So just as a quick, so there's some links on the next slide that highlight this. And so the first one talks about the style and format of the resume. The second one was from University of Calgary, just talking about different advice and what you would like, what resources and stuff you would put on a resume. So I think yes, Laverne, you wanted to jump in.
Be sure they know what not to put on there.
So yes, that's another part.
Date of birth and.
Yeah.
Well, or sometimes not necessarily date of birth, but age. I am, because there's an age limit in some areas. We want somebody from this age to this age or no older than. And here we don't need that. In fact, we don't want that. Okay. Yeah.
They'll tell people you must give us your social insurance number, but that's not true.
Right. During this stage, they don't have to give it. Once they're hired, then they will move. Right. Okay. So yeah. So not give. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Within those pieces. And I think also, like if I look at my resume now in the last few years compared to 20 years ago, now there's often a section, and you'll see that on the link that I'll provide. It's more, here's a list of relevant experiences, then I think then education, and then job experience, and then a bit of volunteering within, and then some people have recommended use references, others say references provided upon request. So that seems to be a little bit flexible depending on the industry and the area. But those are all relevant suggestions for that. Let me just jump through and give some of what I found with job searches and then job interviews within that. So if we're looking at job searches, and I apologize if the font is a little bit smaller, but some resources that students or learners don't think about, and even us as Canadians sometimes, but the government of Canada has their job bank. Each province, so I did a quick search if I'm looking for a job in Vancouver. I did one in Winnipeg as well, but in Vancouver. And so right away it came up some of the provincial jobs that are available, and then also the city of Vancouver or city of other, whatever the smaller centers are around Vancouver. So directing people to some of those and helping them understand the filters. So that could be like a little mini class where you could say, for 20 minutes, or we have this, this information, but over the next 4 weeks, we'll do 15 minutes on what's a Canadian resume, and then 15 minutes on the job search, etc. Yes, Laverne.
Geography lesson about where it exactly is Fort St. John.
Yes, well, no, exactly, because people are like, oh, this looks like a job, I have these skills, and then they start to apply, and you're like, so you're ready to move out of it? No, well, this, you're going to have to travel. You take a,
Even about the profits and where cities
Mhm.
are.
right.
What would be involved in getting a job in George.
Right, and I'm not as familiar, in BC, but like that's an issue in Saskatchewan
Yeah.
and Manitoba where, oh, we're in Manitoba, but what about, different areas like Steinbach or Eli or Portage la Prairie? And they're like, oh, well, I thought I was applying and it's down the street. So this is where churches can decide, and maybe I'll say it here, I could say it at the start or the end, but in the last year, and well, sorry, let me back up. In the free English provided for adult newcomers, so not in the colleges or the school systems, but the free adult learning classes, there were 8 levels. So if you had a Canadian language benchmark of 9 or higher, even 8 or higher, that was enough for university or college. And well, how many of you are familiar and know what Canadian language benchmarks are, in a sense? Okay, so about half of us have, a fairly clear. So when you come to Canada, there were different levels. So with refugee claimants, there wasn't necessarily an English test or a level, but to become a permanent resident, you need what's called CLB4, which is kind of low intermediate. And then with some positions or categories, you needed a CLB7, which is a more professional level. So the government, I may sound a little sarcastic here, so forgive me. The government, in their infinite wisdom, had said, we're having less newcomers and less international students coming into Canada. We're going to cut the supports for them at the same time. And so over the last few years, they've reduced the number coming in. They've also cut the supports. What they forgot or didn't calculate is usually newcomers are accessing those supports for 5 to 7 years. And so ideally, they could have or should have cut most of those supports in 2029, maybe 2030, 2031. But so last year they cut 50 million from their budget. This last March, 90 million. And that's where about 2,500 of the 10,000 teachers, there's maybe more or less, but that's the rough number I've given or felt. So that there's about 25-30% of EAL teachers that have been let go across Canada. And that translates into about 80 or 90,000 newcomers in that upper intermediate advanced range. And most of those classes were focused on job preparation or academic prep. That's why when Janice and I were chatting and I was talking about topics, I said, this is something where churches can move into that gap and we can identify and kind of highlight where do we get the resources and then how could we design different types of programs to help within this. So that's why as I'm looking, through some of these and giving advice, some of you may say, well, yeah, I know that. We just aren't teaching that or we're not interested in that. That's fine. But there's going to be now and also moving forward a large gap in free programs that were provided and people will not have access to those. We'll see, maybe ever, but maybe they'll bring it back in 5 years.
And to get into Douglas, we have to have at least 6 or like
6
really
to
good
7.
6 or
Yeah.
7 to get into the academic prep. So they'll get to 1, 2, 3, 4, which they could probably work at McDonald's with CLB4. And then they have, somehow they have to get up to getting into Douglas College or.
It'll double or triple their time. Like I always tell a story, I have two Ukrainian sisters that are in Dauphin, Manitoba. So they were taking online classes remotely at CLB 4-5 level. If they would continue, and they were dentists in their home country, they were working in a dentist office in Dauphin, but if they would have continued in our programs, then probably 2 to 3 years, they would have been able to have the level they need to get credentialed in Canada. But because this has now been taken away from them, probably on their own, they're looking at 5, 6, 7 years, if ever, that they can move into that. So there's,
It
yeah.
seems so weird to me that when I taught LINC in the 90s, I think we went up to 3. Or maybe 4.
Stages or the levels?
And then they
Yeah.
expanded it way up.
Yeah.
And I assume that was like the LINC providers are cheaper than community college kind of supported programs. I don't know.
Well,
And
there,
now they've cut it way back down again, so it just seems like this low.
well, but there wasn't anything above that. Like it wasn't community colleges though that were teaching. There were,
Students went to like VCC or something after.
Yeah, we had a
Yeah.
community college that did almost all of it.
so they had various levels within that.
They were.
Subsidized class.
Yeah.
Then if they were refugees, they got.
It would have been, oh, okay, so probably there were different pathways. Because for example, in Manitoba, like basically students were paying 4,000 a semester. There was no subsidies, there was nothing in those programs. So that's where it was kind of prohibitive and that's where now, because those have been pulled away, that's kind of their option. Are they going to pay that? I and a few others across Canada are looking at how we can use AI so that they meet a teacher once a day, 1 day a week, and then they have asynchronous work that they work with. And by AI, I don't want to get people scared. I just mean where there's like a speaking program or there's something where they do work, they send it in, and then we can analyze it, but we're not sitting in class 6 or 8 hours a week. They're sitting in class 2 hours a week, but we can reduce the costs of that or, that type of thing. Anyway, I can talk for hours about many topics, so I'll just, yeah, within that setting. So, so I'm going to stop sharing, or I just want to see if I can,
Sorry, did you talk about Indeed?
I didn't, but Indeed, there used to be Monster and Indeed and a whole bunch of job search engines. It seems like Indeed is now kind of the main one that people are going to.
Is that a barrier or a challenge?
Yes, well, and again, so that could be where if you had short mini lessons or let's say a 4-week job prep course, that would be something where I would like Canadian government or City of Vancouver or Indeed, but show them the website and help them understand the filters and kind of guide them through that. I'm going to see if I can, because I wanted to show you a website. Oh, I can maybe end the slideshow. Yes. Let me just show you something that surprised me, but also I found fascinating. If you were making kind of like an 8 or 10 week course, one piece of that you could also look at, because for some people they say, I can't get into my profession right now. What else could I maybe look at? And I found from Work BC, there's career profiles. And so if they are looking in a specific area, that you could direct them and say, oh, well, in this field, there's these jobs or these activities. Sorry, what was I looking at? Maybe it was, but what I also found interesting under this is, oh, right, early child, that's what so let's say, for example, somebody comes to you and says, we're looking for early childhood development. What can I do and what kind of is it? Sorry, I'm just going to switch back and record the screen so that, again, you guys aren't in any of that. It's just me. Okay. So you can find or do a search for what that is, and then go in to explore the career and then see more. We'll go with this one. So the average salary, so the job openings from 2025, I don't know if we could see that. Oh yeah, it's here again. So over the next 10 years, they're expecting 13,000 job openings. So when you're looking at like 5 or 7 different careers, and you could show or guide people through this, you can get an idea of, is this a field that they're needing more people or that it's being reduced? It talks about the training that's required, gives you an idea of an overview. And then there's a list here. So this is where somebody mentioned earlier, relevant skills, even if remote. So if you're helping them with their resume, you could then pull off some of either in the job description of the job or some of the things that are generally described in this manner. You could do some of the keywords if you're looking for jobs in that area. Here's different ways that it's advertised for jobs. And again, this link and website is in my PowerPoint, so you can, but you could have a whole 4-week course just on helping people understand. Because for many of them, I would argue or guess if they're lower level English, they're probably just looking at restaurant or cleaning jobs. And there are well, and some are looking for like childhood, or I take care of kids, or I have kids, or whatever their experience is. So this can be a good, and it even identifies like what are the different levels of programs, what are the qualifications, and what's the certification? Can it help you elsewhere in Canada, etc. So when I found this, and I had never seen something as complete as this before. So I just wanted to pass that on, that if you had like a career job resume, kind of career exploring job search, again, say a 5-hour course that you were offering, that's where you could incorporate, let's look at your resume, let's make it Canadianized. Let's identify cover letters and help a bit with that. And then let's look at some of the jobs that the class, and you saw for myself, like it was just as easy as clicking on a few things. So I could have 10 students, each of them could have something different, but I could quickly go in and then help them, like I could simplify this and help review with that. Was that helpful just to see? I mean, some of you might be familiar with Work BC, but just all the details. Yeah,
You mentioned simplifying it.
yes.
Would that be done before you present it to the students or after?
If I show this, right. Yeah, so this is where I'm approaching this as a teacher trainer of, okay, let's sit down and say, oh, let's do a 5-week program or a 5-hour program in this area. This would be kind of how I would guide it, and here's some of the resources I would use to pull together a course. And then I would look, how do I, like, what's the outline, what are the main themes, and then how would I simplify it in the classroom? So if I know that it's beginner CLB 2-3s, then I would simplify it to a level with pictures and just a few words. If it's kind of CLB 4-5s. Oh, absolutely. This is for you. This is not in the class. This is for you, so you know what resources are there and then how you would.
The very common practice, at least in Vancouver, and I assume everywhere, working under the table, thinking.
That comes into a discussion in a future slide, and yes, we'll talk a bit about that. Because that's also something that, so we will address that. And people may have different ways of approaching that, but we'll chat about that. So let me just go back, because I'm not getting bogged down, but I do want to move through different parts within the slideshow. So let's jump back to the current slide. So this will just, that's pretty. Sorry, it's just thinking. So I have my little piece going around and around on this end. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, let me just shift this a bit so I can I won't be jumping back and forth between these two after this, but I did want to highlight that. That is just, and on that same link or section, I had a whole bunch of other websites opened up, which I put into my PowerPoint, so I won't go into detail with those. The last thing would just be job interview prep. And for that, there's a couple of links with videos and same sort of thing. You could watch, one is actually just a 2-minute video, one is like 20 minutes, but you could use that and some other articles as a base and then kind of form your lesson or plan or lesson information around that setting. So in each section, so finding a job, workplace English, and job advancement, I've also included a slide of what as churches could do. And I put paid here as well. Not necessarily that somebody's going to come in and pay you 40 bucks an hour or whatever. I'm not saying that. But in some churches or in programs, you might have people pay for the textbook, or you might say there's a $20 fee for this 10-week class or whatever. So that's what I mean when I say paid in that regard, or just volunteer. But in your church, often there's volunteers and we say, do you want to join the ESL ministry? And it's kind of scary or unknown. What does that mean? But if you know somebody is in HR or and somebody has skills in, reviewing writing or resumes, etc., you could be a little bit more specific and just say, hey, we're going to start a 5-week program. We're wondering who can volunteer. Here's what you would be doing. You'd be reviewing resumes, maybe 2 or 3 a week or 5 or whatever, but just to think outside the box of, oh, well, they're not coming, I'm not going to go to the ESL ministry because I'm not a teacher and I can't teach, but, oh, we have this professional, or maybe you could say 1 hour on church after Sundays. So, come to our church if you're able to, but from 11 to 12 or 12 till 1, we'll have somebody that will sit down with you and show you how to do the filters and kind of fine tune your job searches, etc. Or I know that in BC there's ISS and several other organizations that are like they're government funded to help people find jobs. So you could find what are the government resources in your area. I won't flip back to the internet because we saw how slow that was, but you can just do a search and see in each area what are the organizations and which are closest to your church or wherever your learners are living, and then refer them to that. Like that's where you probably have an idea of just some of the different areas. One reason I talk about this is I find a lot of churches don't really understand or refer students to the government systems, and a lot of government systems, and that's where Janice and I are working in our roles. How do we help the teachers and the government organizations understand? There's a whole wealth of newcomer support in churches, in mosques, in temples across Canada, but there's often not a lot of crossover. So, yeah.
Yes, those are federally funded. All of their resources are online and they're
Yes.
paid. Because these are our taxpayers that are paid for it. So you can find all the level 1 materials you need about any topic possible on language.ca, the
Mhm.
government site for the LINC programs.
Yeah, and that's where, like earlier, someone had said, just what I've learned and experienced, and then I added in. That's great, but this can also be an additional support within that. That because we, even I know, so in Manitoba, we have 70 different organizations helping newcomers in some role or capacity. I know about 40 of them just because of my role and but I still don't know many that are out there. And so the more I look and research and find, then the more I can connect people to within that. Or the last one there, just with job prep, same thing. Maybe there's people that you could say, here's 8 questions. Can you come every Tuesday night for the next 3 weeks and just interview people and help them get ready for their exam, not exam, but their job? Any comments or questions about this?
But just back up
Yes,
to
yes.
about like buying the textbook or playing a registration fee. We got into some good chat at Janice's session this weekend. Janice, I'm sorry, another friend's name is Janice. Anyway, about like getting people to actually be committed. And so buying a book can be a commitment. And then, but another model, I've been in training that's like you pay a fee, but then if you attend 80% of the sessions, you get it back and stuff. It's a carrot.
That's a,
So-
yeah,
so
no, that's a
put
great
yourself
point.
there For getting,
Mhm.
because people can very well be and so tired.
Exactly, and that's, so there's a Ukrainian group that started with 4 classes in Manitoba 4 years ago as Ukrainians started coming in. They now have 37 classes. So it's yeah, they've done an amazing job with very little money to spread across the province, especially since a year ago, June, the government cut all the Ukrainians cannot access the government services anymore. So again, another long conversation, but that's the model they use. So it's $50 per semester for their English classes. It's 6 hours, 7 hours a week. But some of the centers charge $150. So the $50 price is the same for everyone, but they charge $150. And if you have 70% of your exam scores and attendance, then you get that $100 back. So it's still 50 for those that are coming, but they allow that you might be tired, you might, like, I've had one lady working full time. She has 5 kids that are 10 years and younger. She was fasting during the month of Ramadan from March, and she was still in most, like I said to her, you are very tired. You should go home and rest. She's like, well, I'm not really resting at home. But coming to class was right, but that's where sometimes when I see people say, oh, they're just, living off the government or whatever, that's not been my experience 99.9% of the time. They're very diligent and want to be contributing members, and they're doing everything they can. And for us to come and support them within that. But yeah, so when I said at the very start about myself, like out of the box thinking, those are the types of things that I'm helping churches just kind of like, maybe we haven't considered that, or we could have some discussion. Because I've spoken in some groups and people have been very angry with me. No, you can't charge anything. This is free. And I'm like, it's not the free concept. It's the commitment, and can we, so yes, but the money goes to materials, snacks, or you get most of it back, but just something to help that. Oh, there's 10 today and then there's 2 next week. And then there's 3. That's a frustration for many of us, I think, within that. Okay, I'll go a little bit faster through some of the next slides, but so I'll just share some of this, but I think this is where some of you mentioned a bit earlier, but with listening skills, even small talk, I've had many students say, I don't talk to anyone at work. What do I say? Well, what do we say in Canada? First thing I've said to my parents who are farmers for the last 30 some years, how's the weather in Alberta? Because I'm in Manitoba, like weather, sports teams, they have no clue when somebody says, oh, the, Vancouver, soccer team, whatever. Yeah, so we have the Canucks, the BC Lions. There's Lions around here, like, but helping them get familiar, the sports terms, weather, weekend activities, places to go, that type of thing, coworkers, meeting. So again, you could design, and I'm encouraging that we design 5, 7, 10-week programs around any or a series of these. And I think I say it in the next one, but the idioms. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, no, and then like the idioms or the phrases, like many of us as Canadians don't really realize how often we say things that are, not easy to understand within that. Other ideas within this, so understanding paychecks, deductions, what taxes, some of them are okay with that, but why do I have a union fee? They didn't even understand they were part of a union, for example. And as Janice mentioned earlier, I can give you 4 or 5 websites and you can type in CLB2 or CLB4, and it will pull up material, government made, professionally made, for just looking at a paycheck or just, so I'm glad that you're willing and have the experience of making your own materials, but we can move in different directions very easily because we can pull off what's already been made. And they often even have teacher's guide, listening exercises, etc., appropriate for that level. And that's where you can include the grammar, but it's real world tasks, and they have a writing exercise, a quick reading, listening, etc. Within that. I guess that was all on that page. Well, so what I just said was my next slide, but that's, and I don't have the links here, but I can include some of the common ones. But you can also, and we'll do that in a bit, we'll do a search online for yourself, and we'll look at, CLB, I wouldn't say do one level, but CLB 3, 4 paychecks, or English at the workplace, or CLB4 going to the doctor, CLB5, 6 talking with my manager in a meeting, and it will come up with, you know, some of those are 60, 80 page PDFs that have the whole, you know, like a 20-hour course, 30-hour course within that. So within this category, that's where I would recommend we can create workplace English courses or piggyback off of material already done. But I'd also encourage you to tap shoulders and maybe once every 2 or 3 months, have some kind of gathering, invite people from other churches, invite the community, but have 3 or 4 professionals to share about their careers. I would recommend audio or video recording it with not the people, but the professionals speaking, and then turn that into an English lesson. Because now you have that real experience, Canadian level I shouldn't say it that way, but you have people speaking at what they're like, they're not really trained or slowing down or keeping, but then you can slow it down. So you have a bit lower level, put it at 0.75. And I'm going to show you a little bit at the end if we have time. How can we use ChatGPT or Copilot? I have a whole 2-hour course on that, so that's not tonight's focus. But how do you use those things to make questions or a lesson plan from an audio or from a video?
That's great, because I know Laverne was running one iteration of our program with the church by herself at one point and had people do like modules, right? But then they didn't want to come a second and a third time, am I right? Sometimes they.
Well,
That's
it
the story
depends
there.
on what the module was.
But if you could capture them, you'd have it.
Right, yeah, with
Huh?
I don't recall that.
Oh, sorry, that's how that's where I heard.
okay.
Oh,
Right, but so
Thank you.
so even on Thursday night and tonight, like I'm recording both sessions and it's kind of overlap, but I always like, I think there's so much, or even at the conference on the weekend, none of those sessions are recorded, but there were 4 or 5 running simultaneously at each time. And I was like, what a waste, because there's some excellent material that each professional is sharing. So if that can be captured and then, you know, some of it isn't used, but then you could, anyway, it can all be used. The other thing that you could also ask in your churches, maybe there's people who own companies or that are in the manager positions, ask them to go to their managers or to the CEO or whoever and just say, we have a group of 8 newcomers or 10 newcomers. Can they come and job shadow for an hour a week or whatever it is? So you could have say a 5-week prep class, and then you could have like a 2 or 3 week practicum. One of the organizations that I'm helping with in May and June in Winnipeg is called Healthy Muslim Families. So it's an organization, nonprofit, mostly geared towards those in the Muslim community, but I've done presentations and worked closely with their leadership. My son and I came in and gave talks about finances and starting a business to the Muslim teens of the different leaders and stuff there. But they're having a 5-week office administration course. And the certificate is 9 months if you go to Red River. So this isn't replacing it, but it's an introduction so that those with intermediate level English can take the 5 weeks. They can see if that's something they're interested in. And then if they want, they can then go to Red River College or a tech college to get certified. So it's kind of a teaser. But at the end of that, they have 2 or 3 weeks where they're going to job shadow. And anyway, that's just one example where if you can incorporate. So again, people aren't volunteering for your ESL ministry, but you're able to then bring them in. Because a lot of times I found if people can get involved and meet the newcomers, that's where there's now connection and they start to look out more for them. And anyone who's in the workforce, 10, 20, 30, 40% of our workforce is often made up at work from people from other cultures and some with various levels of English. So they're already aware of the challenges. They might not just have connected, oh, you know, those that are around me are similar to those that are coming into our ESL programs.
It's like bringing your kid to work.
Oh, right. That's the joke I made on Thursday. Yeah, things, because I was like, we used to have bring your kid to work, grade 9, all the kids would come in. But yeah, within that. So this is in a similar set. Bring your newcomer friend to work, but ask in your church, who's available and what businesses or companies could have. Yes.
And even
think this would fulfill another need that I've heard, and that is just a way to make friends.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But you are mainly, focused on employment, right? Employment.
Tonight for 2 hours, yes. Like, what is your question? Like,
One of my big concerns, I feel very strongly about it, is the mothers. The
yes,
mothers in
Yeah.
immigrant families,
Absolutely.
refugee families. The mothers sit back, they never learn, they won't try because they're afraid, and they have no confidence that they can do it. No
Mhm,
matter what you say to them,
mhm.
their kids, as they acquire some skills, they start to make fun of them.
That has happened for some, yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
And, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I wish that there was something for the mothers.
Well, remember what Janice talked about, how in one church she was working at, the parents or adults were just sitting around while the kids were in daycare, and they were,
Lesson.
yeah, within that. So that's a whole nother area, and I agree that's something within. So tonight I'm talking a little bit more with the workplace, but yeah, no, but within that, there's again hundreds of hours of free material that you could. So if you set up a program in your church for mothers or in some other community setting, maybe they can't come to church. There
It's
could be an
getting them
often.
to-
Right, so Janice mentioned SOCUM, so Southern Ontario ESL Ministries. It's a loose connection of the churches in Southern. So the person who's the current president right now, for a number of years, she and another friend went to the different areas and did ministries in factories or other places. So because they said they won't have time, or they're too tired or not able to come to, and so they would then go to where those were gathering. So maybe in our communities, we could go to community centers. The kids are doing skating lessons or swimming or whatever. We could ask, could we simultaneously, even if it's a 30-minute engage with it, right, to have. So we can talk about ways to reach the mothers and brainstorm within that. But that is a very real need for many of them from that. So let me just talk about what do you think are this is from one of the departments of Canada, the Canadian government. What do you think they found through research were the two biggest obstacles for newcomers for workplace, so employment or social development? What do you think those blanks represent? Just give me some guesses. Unemployment?
Fine.
Or finding employment? Okay, good. Anything else? Okay, so getting a job, finding employment, anything else? Making friends, okay? Keeping a job, right? Because sometimes they get hired and they get let go because okay. Well, the different answers that you gave tie into that. So they found cultural adaptation. So I'm not just making friends, but also, is this culturally appropriate? Is this not? And then soft skill requirements. And that's also of just keeping the job. How are they responding appropriately or not within those around them? In some cultures, it's common to come up and touch someone. In other cultures, it's not. I'll tell a quick Filipino story. I was in the Philippines. This was 30 years ago. But I had another friend, I had a friend who was from the Philippines. He was the youth pastor in the church. We were in a mall one day walking down and some of you know where this is going. We're in the mall one day walking between the stores, and he just casually reached over and took my hand, and we walked hand in hand. And I was tense, but I also remembered it's a sign of friendship from my cultural adaptation course I took before I went. But so it's just a level of comfort in the way of saying, I'm comfortable with you. One of my close friends in Winnipeg is from Lebanon, and he and his family came to Canada in 2016. So when we meet, it doesn't matter if we're at one of his kids' baseball games or at the airport or wherever, we kiss each other on the cheeks. It's just the common greeting and the tradition that he and I are comfortable with. And I know it's not comfortable for some of the Canadians around me when they see that, but I'm just like, this is my friend, and it's a sign of respect within
I thought
that.
of another story, but come
Yeah.
back to me later if we have time.
Okay, that sounds good. Appreciate that. Well, that's the challenge when any of us in the room, we probably have a lot of stories that fit in with some of these pieces. So that stat was taken from the website listed there. I'm going to move on with advancement. Again, I'm just going to go through instead of having a conversation because I want to have some pair work that you'll work in. So sometimes they think it's just I need to improve my English, but as we've talked about Canadian culture, or more commonly now, the multicultural environment. You know, it's not just, well, I understand quote unquote Western culture, Canadian culture, but well, I'm now working with people from 5 different countries and 3 different continents. So my understanding that area. And then, or it may also be upskilling. Is everyone familiar with the word upskill? Or is that
But not really.
yeah, that's a general response I get when so it means getting extra credentials to move to a higher position within my job or career. So I'm not sure. Yeah. So again, I'm just going to jump through parts of this, but could we provide a soft skills course within our churches? We've already talked about workplace English, but you know, or so soft skills would include things like negotiation and interaction, kind of the conflict, right? Conflict resolution. Um, because that goes back to what the government of Canada was saying is one of the main areas why Canadian newcomers are less successful. So upskilling, so for example, professional development courses, so maybe in their profession or industry, there's a certain number of credits that they need to be taking. Specialized workshops. I'll just use the example as a teacher, I can take classes within my profession, but then maybe I could take like a business course, like a short weekend business thing or something working with young adults or those with special needs or something to just help give me more or micro credentials. This is what universities and colleges are moving towards in a lot of areas, not just in AI or in, but it's usually 3 or 6 week courses and it gives you skills within a very specific narrow area. And so for some newcomers, they're like, well, I'm here. What do I do to become a manager? Maybe you can see within their profession, like what micro credentials do they need? And some are free online, others are paid, but maybe they're like in their profession, there's some that, so they're not having 4 more years of university, but they're taking over a year, 3 or 4 micro credential programs, and that's enough to help them move to a higher level. Okay.
Because it strikes me that
Yep.
these dentists that you said that suddenly don't have the higher LINC levels and that, you know, take longer to get that to that level or maybe never do, we're losing their skill and we need these medical people.
Why we bring
Yeah.
immigrants to the end.
I know.
Yeah, I know if we talk about Alberta, it's a bit controversial, but I saw a LinkedIn post last week and it surfaced again yesterday, but it was just an article written how we're cutting hospital staff and they're doing a referendum on newcomers, etc. And yet the backbone of most of the hospital is based on newcomer, and it's not new. My mom worked as a nurse in our local community in the 80s, like people from Hong Kong, people from Philippines, other countries for 40, 50 years. That's what's been able to allow us to take care of people successfully. Anyway, yeah, we'll leave that for a different workshop. Okay. So for example, with Canadian cultural resources, I don't want to overwhelm you, but I went through and I started to go, I made this part of the PowerPoint about a week ago, and I took about 45 minutes on a rabbit trail because I started reading all of these articles. There's tons of resources out there. So like this is from University of Alberta, Achieve is a government organization, Centennial College, settlement.org in Ontario, etc. So these are not just, you know, my opinion is, but this is what Canadian call. These are well-researched, well-written articles. And like the very first one, what are 9 tips? And there was a question earlier, like looking through that, is it too high, higher level? that's where we could look at ChatGPT in a little bit, but you can take any article, cut and paste it into ChatGPT and just say, simplify this to a CLB 3-4 level. And it will then reduce it, make the sentences simpler. You could add a few discussion questions, and within a minute or two, you can have a 1-hour lesson plan that you could just move into from these and yeah. So that's where, again, not everyone's looking at the AI aspect, and I know there's various opinions, but it can help us in this regard to make things quick and simple and not think, oh, well, I don't have a course for that. We can make sections and courses quite quickly because of some of these things. There was also a couple of videos. Yeah, I think the second video was the one that was like it was from a visa services company. So it's an immigration consulting company helping people, but it's 3 minutes and it was very precise, and just here's areas that they see there's people they've brought in to help find jobs that struggle with once they're in the workplace. And I think the first one was like a 1-hour one, but again, you could take out chunks of it or pieces of it from that. Oh, no, sorry. The third one was the 1-hour panel discussion. So they had new Canadians and had them discuss. So that's another format that I would recommend or is kind of suggest for you there's a group, or there's many of you here from different churches. If one church is having something like this, now you have, like, talk with Janice. Now you have a range of people. Like a few months ago, one church in Winnipeg had some real estate agents talk about buying their first home. And what's the first home buyers program? What's your RSP? How do you get a home inspection? And I was like, why didn't you tell me? Because they ended up having 12 people show up. I'm sure with myself and Brenda is kind of like a Janice, but in Winnipeg, she has a connection and helps coordinate the ESL. I'm sure we could have had 50 or 70 people show up to that because we would spread the word. So that could be another thing to consider moving into the fall and next winter. Is there capacity that we could set up maybe a workshop once a month on some of these settlement themes and issues? And again, please record it. And then that would help you provide material, but then also have that as a database within that. And that's where you could, like, some of those of you that have classes and a few students are very good speakers, approach them and say, hey, we're doing this panel. We're going to have an HR professional and someone else. Can you come on, join us and talk a bit about what you've been frustrated with and what's made you happy when you've been working in our system, Canadian. So,
I just like that idea very much about churches connecting together, because not every church can do everything. And that's not just related to ESL, that's in youth ministry, that's in
The whole
everything.
world.
yeah. And like going back to Welcome, like that's what Welcome Church was set up as well, is not every church will be able to manage and coordinate everything. So let's help them connect with each other. Who's doing what in certain areas? And then how do we provide additional resources from other organizations so that we're not reinventing the wheel each time. So within that, so some of this I've already shared, but that's where you could have an HR from a company come in. You could have career counselors from your high schools maybe, or from colleges, and ask them, can they come and do it? And if you go to many of newcomer organizations and you said to them, we have a group of 20 to 30 newcomers between 3 different churches, can you come in and do several presentations? Most of them will be running to your door. Just because they have a budget and they have a mandate to go and speak in community events. And the settlement agencies. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
See, we had a one-day event in Richmond and I invited the gambling association, anti-gambling.
Here's how to do blackjack.
Because a lot of immigrants, men, get stuck gambling and they can't get out of it.
Yeah.
And so where do? You go to Gambling Anonymous. So I called Gambling Anonymous and they came. And most of the people that came to that conference were really mad at me because gambling. And I said, yeah, but your students
Yes.
there are a significant number that have this problem. And so all of the social services organizations will come if you ask them.
Yeah, or another thing to consider, I'm just thinking out loud here, so forgive me. But in maybe one church hosts and others invite, but you ask 4 or 5 different organizations to come and just set up a booth. So it's a Saturday morning or, Tuesday night or whatever, and then invite the newcomers in all of your ESL classes and have that, I guess part of that is just building the connection with the settlement agencies in your area. Because again, they have a mandate and a budget where they need to speak in so many community events per year. And a lot of times they're not reaching to the churches, not because they're anti-Christian, they're just not aware or know which church is willing to be open to that. And so when I was in Thunder Bay, we found out there's one organization there. So in some cities, we have multiple. Thunder Bay is one main organization for all newcomer services. The executive director of it is a strong believer and from one of the churches there. And so she has a multicultural team from various religions and backgrounds, but she loves to take their organization and go into some of the different churches. And as long as she has an invite, like she's not initiating it, but she has an invite from, then she can easily direct some of that staff and resources with. So you'll be surprised, and again, different provinces have different percentages, but within any newcomer organization, there will be a percentage of believers and or others, that you can connect with and share and help as well outside of that specific event. So with the networking, which Janice mentioned earlier, is how do we connect and network? Okay, let's something else that you might want to think about in our churches. In our classes, we sometimes hear stories, and this will come back to Laverne to what you mentioned in the workplace about getting paid under the table, etc. So there's some companies that are paying under the table. They have unsafe or unhealthy work conditions. So is there someone in your church that has either a bit of knowledge or a heart to help in those areas that could be the resource person? And it could be somebody that's every year, every 2 years, you kind of rotate around. But so as you hear those, so if students come to me and say, I have this problem at work, and we're talking about work-related stuff, I don't really have, I have a network I can send them to, but like, what do we do? It's not for me to kind of jump in and solve that situation. We're not the experts or professionals in that. But if we have so one of the teachers I know, her husband used to work for Manitoba Health and Safety. So as newcomers would come to me, we would refer, we usually would ask a couple of questions just to make sure that this was something that was guided and had regulation for, but then we would refer it to that person within the organization from that. So just something again to think about. Maybe there's somebody that knows a bit about that and they don't want to come and teach in your class, but they could be the go-to person in your church in that area. Same with knowing your rights in the workforce. Maybe there's lawyers or immigration consultants in your church. For me personally, I never refer people to one person. So if somebody comes and says, oh, I'm having this trouble with immigration and what can you help me? I say, here's 3 immigration consultants I know and trust. Some of them will charge a fee. Some of them will tell you for free for 20 minutes or whatever, or here's 3 real estate agents. Here's 3 lawyers. So just, guard yourself as well, but there could be a way of helping within it. And then again, the settlement agencies come up. Laverne, did you want to just jump in and, yeah?
I just normally not in the workplace this happens, although it can, but it's people who are, it's immigrants and refugees who are trying to find jobs, cleaning houses,
Yeah,
doing repairs and that kind of thing. And they don't see themselves, I don't think, as hard done by or
right.
they want to be paid under the table.
Yeah.
So educating them about that.
And I think some of these topics could be something that we could have like a database where it's created and then churches could just share of within, so I'm not sure, yeah. What I usually do is I usually have like a 15-minute conversation. What are the benefits and negatives of that, of doing that? And then I tell some stories at the end where some people will do that for 6, 8, 10 years, then CRA finds out, or whichever. And I've known some newcomers that have left Canada because they were then slapped with a bill that was, 200,000 because they hadn't been claiming for 6 years or what. So I always tell people that it's kind of a trust system, but there will be a verification at some point. There'll be a day of reckoning within that. But that's at the end of the day, I also don't have the authority to say stop it. I can just say here's the benefits. I mean, you get the cash and you get this and that, but there are the consequences that some people face, and it's not in 1 year or 2 years. It's like letting our kids eat candy, and then when they're 15 or 16, like, well, their teeth fell out. I mean, that's extreme, but it's that same type of just expressing it and then seeing. So I'll move on, but that can be something that maybe there could be some of these topics where it's more of a series that any church could show and share within that. So we won't spend long on this, but you could do a quick Google search. Where's your church? What are the settlement agencies? What are other newcomer supports in your area? There's a government website that maps that for all across Canada, but you could do a search yourself. I won't take time tonight. Some of you are already familiar with that, but what we will take a few minutes for is I want you to work with a partner. I see some of us are kind of nodding off, and myself included. That's why I'm kind of up and down. But with a partner, pick one of these topics. So in the area of job prep, resume, job interview, or whatever the third one was. On the job, we had that whole list of small talk or negotiation, talking with a manager, etc. Job advancement, micro credentials. So just take and do a quick search and just find what would be on that topic. What I would say though, and I should have this in my slide and I don't, when you do your search, add in a CLB level. When you do your search, so have whatever your word or the words are for your themes, but then have like CLB 3.4 or CLB 5.6 or even 1.2. Like have a two level range and help that to, because I can do any topic and come up with millions of searches, but do that with a partner. We won't take a long time, but I just want you to look at that. And after that, we'll take one article that's online and I'll show you how to simplify it using ChatGPT or Copilot. Again, I have a 2-hour workshop on that, so we can also do that at a later time, but I'll show you just very quickly. So yeah, just click the person that's next to you. There's groups of.
Lesson or
Yes,
just?
yeah.
But that's where there's this whole range of material that you can easily access. So don't think, oh, I'm doing this 5-week, I have to start from zero. There's going to be a lot that you can access. Now, Sophia is also going to chat a little bit about some of what resources that you're familiar with, just to help us. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a vast array of government sponsored resources that we would refer clients to, like any of the settlement agencies, Mosaic, ISSC. They have offices everywhere, and yeah, they're almost always transit accessible, and so those are really good resources. But we have engaged quite closely with the Burnaby Public Library, but I know that BPL offers very similar programs.
Public Library.
The Vancouver
Sorry.
Public Library, and
BC talk.
yeah.
Well, it is, but acronyms can sometimes like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but the public library is just has a wealth of resources. And community librarians specifically are people who are employed by the library who just want to reach out to the community and see them plugged in with resources.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's online materials. You can browse the entire catalog of LinkedIn Learning, like 11,000 courses or something. If you have a free, like,
Your
public library card.
Yeah.
So you can get all those things online for free, but also they're hosting LinkedIn seminars and career talks, and you can even maybe help your friends by going on the website and highlighting you free events that they can.
Some conversation circles, like and the VPL I know has as a newcomer, you can be a volunteer helping other newcomers. Like it's got a name. So they really do help, and also getting guest speakers coming in, like having the police come. Because
Yeah.
that's not the first person they call in their country,
Right.
but here they do, and that's a guest that can,
Yeah, fire department, I mean, some families are living in a basement with no windows, right? That's just the reality of the landlord or the situation, so being aware of what the landlord needs to be adding, et cetera, yeah. Sorry, my mind's thinking of a lot of things, but, water safety, we're often surprised, but across Canada, there's hundreds of little children that, not hundreds, there's hundreds of people who die each year across Canada because of water safety. A percentage of them are little children, even in, just a few inches of water in the bathtub. Because the parent puts them in, they don't realize how slippery it is, and then they block or a phone call, like, so even just making them more aware. My wife also teaches English, and 3 years ago, she got a message from her manager, but one of her students was in a boat. They had 4 life jackets. They were only 50 meters off of shore, but because the water was cold, the boat flipped somehow. They don't know how. And the father, who was in his 50s, and a son who was like 25, like young, healthy, but they got their bodies cramped up in the water, and then it was a month later that we were scheduled to have the water safety talk. But, again, I don't want to bring the room down, but just, helping our learners and newcomers be aware of there's safety regulations, but also just what can we do to help prevent some of these things that are, I think sometimes are preventable within that. Good. Anything else you wanted? Sorry, I kind of jumped in. So anything?
Just, I also had a quick conversation, even around Laverne, you'd mentioned that a lot of people tend to work under the table. And part of the friendship we can extend, especially with people who are fleeing persecution from a corrupt government, is like in the way we talk about government resources, is understanding, like, you may not agree with every policy change that our government makes, but generally you are safe and they are not going to take advantage of you, and they are here to protect you. And so even the way we talk about the government resources that are available, because it can be a really huge, like, mental shift for families to be making when they get here, I think.
Yeah.
Helpful.
And many different countries, like there was a Ukrainian family that came and a pastor came running to me and said, "Oh, these poor people, they have no help, no supports. They've been in a hotel for a month." I was like, "But that should be paid by the government." And like there were different things set up when many first arrived. So the church helped them with paying for an apartment, paid the hotel, helped them get a job, paid for furniture, just, loved on them, which is the place of the church. But I went to the pastor when I heard about it, and then about 2 months later, I was able to meet this couple. And almost the very first thing the man said was, "I don't trust our government." And it was, so I don't know whether that couple knew or not, but I made sure the pastor knew after. There was a whole government program providing those specific things. So as a church, you could have they weren't trying to cheat the church, but just as a church, you can put those resources to, refugee claimants or others that don't have those supports. But there were programs in place. They just didn't want to accept it because of their belief of the government. So Anyway, again, all of us and many of us have stories within that. So next steps, I'll be very quick with this, and then what I'll do is we'll have the AI as an overtime session. So if there are some people that need to leave and move on, that's no problem. You can watch the recording, but next steps just within this, you know, again, coordinate with each other, utilize Janice as a resource person, and if there's things, materials you shared or created and are okay, then share with her, and that way we can coordinate and pass that on to more. Again, I'm very strong and connect with settlement agencies in your areas. And there's many people in churches around us, maybe some of us have worked in different churches. Maybe they don't have an ESL program and they don't want to start one right now, that's fine. But see if, you know, talk around and ask if you can bring people and join more of these networking groups, and then join the list that Janice has to help coordinate within the Metro and Greater Vancouver area. Questions?
Did I tell my story?
Tell us your story,
Well,
Nigel.
it was when I was teaching LINC, it was during the Yugoslavia war crisis, and so there were a lot of people states here.
Mm.
And in our programs, and there was people talking about their value and their culture. This is back to the soft skills and back
Yes, okay.
directness. You said
Yes.
and you didn't see if it ragged, or they said, you know, if you like something, if you smile, it's smile number 6. It's like passive aggressive smile. So, you know, it's like we say what we think. Okay, in Canada, you've got to see what around. That's all. I think it's so obvious until
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, and
why are you applying? Why do you want to work for this company? Well, you're the first one who called me for an interview.
right, I like, yeah,
You gotta say.
yeah, exactly. Good. Other questions, maybe about finding resources, thinking of things within your church, etc. Okay, so I'll just,
And
Yep.
here, so if anyone here is offering specifically, like work related English classes right now, like, you know, finding a job, everything you just talked about, like that sort of module, maybe 4 or 5. Has anybody done that, or are they doing it?
I don't know if very, like, there's only a handful across Canada that I'm aware of, which is one of the reasons why I've been, like, when we chatted, but again, this is something, because right now, most employees and most people haven't really thought what's happening with, because it's only been a month since those supports were pulled. But in 4 to 6 months, people will start paying for this because they'll realize that they need to, and people will step in for that. But employers will start realizing their employees were in English classes for 4, 6, 8 hours a week, 10 hours a week, and their level of English will have gone down. They're like, why? And they wouldn't realize the effort they were putting in outside of class. So that's where we as a church can step into that gap. And that's where this is a bit timely with, as we move to the fall, maybe that's something to be considering, and or maybe there's a sharing that you all advertise, but do it in an online format. So you have one person from one church, but there's 2 or 3 different.
It seems like in our church, it'd be less in the English program. These things would come up, I'm thinking, as the refugee families we've sponsored, and some of those.
One and the same.
It could,
Yeah. So
but it could
yeah.
be either or,
Yeah,
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, like under which area kind of leads the charge in this area, but the international students as well, like many of them had more of a pathway to PR, getting a permanent residency. That's now been uprooted as well, but some of them are saying, but I still need, like, I can work 24 hours a week. So there's multiple groups that this, I think, can address and cover. It's just kind of. So I'll take a step back as well. Some of you are familiar with Rick and Patty Love. They have a material and program called Love New Canadians. And so they help churches with material, and they call it 3, like kind of a 3 pathway. So their ultimate goal is to help people be introduced to Jesus, but their main introductory is just settlement areas. And some church, And right, yeah, there's a whole range, like I can't even name all that, but there's a whole range. And I've been in some churches where they're like, no, we're just teaching the Bible English. That's fine. That's not a problem within that. But what they found is let's do a whole bunch of settlement culture, relational topics, workplace, whatever it is. There will be seekers out of that, typically 10 to 20%, I think they found, who then say, I'm interested more in deeper spiritual things, or I want spiritual. They go through then more of some of the Bible classes that are alpha or exploration, or go through the book of John, etc. And then out of that, there will be a percentage who accept Christ, are baptized, and move into the fellowship.
This takes a lot of love and respect to people when you give something and they might expect it to be conditional or tied. But
Yeah.
Yes.
no, it's like, you want to come for this, you want to come for Bible, that's available.
Yeah.
You're invited, but we want to serve you.
Exactly.
Where is
That's
this
a lot of
couple
price.
They're out of Calgary. So they travel to like they travel across Canada helping churches, etc. Some of you kind of nodding, so maybe if you can share with Laverne the website and yeah, so you guys can maybe have a discussion after. They have a range of materials and yeah, within that. But I would also say like Janice has materials, there's other materials available as well, like Gail Thiessen. And yeah, so there's many resources available from different groups and organizations. I'll just end off here with, this is my email, and so again, I encourage you to talk and interact and work with Janice. But if there are things that come up, or if there's other areas, I can be coming here every few months if necessary, or there's other workshops I'll be doing that I'll have on Zoom over the next 6 months, year, etc. But I'm happy to be in touch or follow up. But there may be some things you direct to me, and I will just direct back to Janice as well, just because she's a great coordinator and a resource person in this area.
Most important question of the night. How do you pronounce your last name?
So when I introduce myself, I usually talk about my first name and my last
Yeah.
name. So it's pronounced fall as in fall down,
Okay.
or the season. So German background, it means post or pillar. In my first name, somebody else had also mentioned, Doug, I think you were saying, but students often call me either, well, Trevor for many of them, but for those with a pronunciation in different ways, I've often been called either Mr. Travel or Mr. Trouble. So those are the two, and I have traveled. I've been in 14 countries. I am sometimes trouble, but so all three are good. But it's that saying, just don't call me anything, but not late for dinner. So,
Last name for an ESL teacher, like.
yeah, yes, yeah, within that, and the silent letters and that whole, well, and one thing I didn't add in there, but I was in Indonesia twice, once for 5 years, once for 3 years. And so when I've come back each time, I had no credit history, no credit cards, no job history. So often in my classes, as my students struggle or talk about their struggles, I share a bit. Twice in my life, I've been to $100 in the bank. I've been to using food banks. Like I've been on the path of where they've often been at. And that's allowed me that sense of understanding and able to communicate more. And then being a financial counselor, then I've seen some of the traps with the easy pay, or don't pay for 2 months or 2 years, or that whole, and again, I've had people who had to leave Canada just because of getting too far in debt and they didn't know what to do, etc. So there's a whole nother workshop I do on finances and stuff. So is there interest if I show you quickly how to simplify materials? And okay, so just give me a very short switch here again from sharing from